Welcome, everyone, to episode 8 of the Total Relationship Podcast. I'm
Wait,
Kim
wait,
Coconut.
wait. Can I do an introduction? It's
I,
eight
you know,
episodes.
yeah, Tyson,
No,
the hard thing is it's
not my
just hard.
gift. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Consistency is not your gift. Everyone,
Yes,
that was my
fine.
co-host,
I'm gonna sit
Tyson
here and
Ray.
wait.
He's the CEO here at Form Wealth Advisors. In episode 7, we introduced the second pillar of the total relationship approach called total relationship investing, or TRVest for short. Tyson and I talked about the power of research and how to apply it to your investment decisions. Today, one of my favorite topics, I'm really excited we're getting into it, is talking about how to time your clients' needs without timing the market. We are going to dive into the reality of the markets and the reality of clients' lives and using time-based segmentation. We're going to talk about a couple of different buckets that we use in the total relationship approach and why they're not going to look the same for everyone, especially depending on their generation of life that they're living in. So I hope you guys actually enjoyed this episode with us as we dive in. So Tyson, why why do you like to make sure advisors focus on timing your clients' needs and not timing the markets?
So now you're gonna let me talk?
I will. Just at that one
Now I can
question.
go.
Yep,
Okay.
you can do it.
Because one is known and the other one isn't known.
Hmm.
No one knows what the future holds for the markets, but everybody's living a life with some expectation of what they want to do tomorrow or into the future, or what they want to do next for their house or their car or their kids or their health, or these things that everybody has, that we've kind of honed in on. That's like, wait, okay, everyone's going to have a roof over their head, and people have loved ones they want to take care of, and people have their health that they want to be monitoring, and people are going to want to take and enjoy things in life, travel or leisure. And so we just realized that instead of trying to time markets to figure out what to do, or point clients' attention there, we want to point clients' attentions to things that are known, which is tell us and ask them the questions, and they'll give you the answers. And then you ask time. I was on a call yesterday, and the call went, they're happy with how things are going. Do you want to have any review of the portfolio? No. Past performance? No. Everything's fine. Okay. Do you need anything? No. Well, then I got into, because I always ask them what do they want to talk about, and they're like, "How's the portfolio? Portfolio is fine. Do you want me to dig into that?" No. Okay. We let them go first, and then we go with our questions, and it was, how's the health? And it's like, okay, got to have a hip replacement. He may have a stent put in. Are you worried about that? Maybe put off some of our travels. Okay. So no money needed for travels. You don't need any money for health because the insurance didn't cover that. Okay. What about the house? Any improvements to the house? Now, they bought the house a year ago. And the answer was, well, we're going to need windows at some point and maybe some flooring. And it's like, well, okay.
Ooh, those
When?
aren't cheap.
Well, it's like, yeah, it's when. When are you gonna do that this year? Maybe.
Mhm.
I said, okay, well, what do you think it's gonna cost? And they're hemming and hawing. And I said, how about 50 grand? Would that do it? They're like, oh yeah, that would take care of it. And I said, okay, then I'm going to look into the portfolio, and I'm going to go find where 50 grand is sitting that I think we should harvest and set it aside, because if the next 12 months you're going to do it. Um, and then I said, do you need me to send it to you? Because there's a psychology for clients that if it's in the portfolio, or if it's in the markets, or if it's in it's the later money. This is for
Mhm.
later. They won't do it. And yet, if you time the client's need, and for some clients, you need to put that timed need in their bank account a couple months
Mhm.
beforehand, they'll actually go do it. And so it's again, I don't know what the market's going to do in 6 months. I don't know who's going to win the election at the end of this year. I don't know who's going to control the House and Senate. I don't know when the Fed's going to cut interest rates or raise interest rates. I don't know what inflation is going to do. I know there's people guessing that, but I know that the markets currently are trending near their all-time highs. And a client told me they needed some money that we weren't expecting. And so we harvest that with the market at the all-time highs. We stick it in the money market and earn some interest. And then we encourage them to go spend it because they told us to.
Yeah.
And
Well, they
that
spend
is timing that we can control.
Yeah, well, and they've spent so much of their time before they're depending on their investments for their income, where they've been using their salary as their income. They set that money aside, right? They're paying into their savings account to replace those windows. So when they see that money sitting there, they're ready to actually buy the windows. But you're basically equipping them to do that, knowing that it's there and it kind of encouraging them to actually do what they want to do.
Part of the psychology shift that I want the advisors to have in communicating with the clients on the front end, when you're bringing this to them, when they're coming to you as a new client, it's clarifying. Are you the type of person that would rather get more money from their portfolio so you feel like you're saving for the vacation, the home improvement, so that you'll allow yourself to do it? Or do you want us to just basically, when the one ticket items come up, that it's the fix the roof, fix the windows, buy the car, the one offs that happen not every year? Do you want us to be able to help monitor that and then raise the money for you? And the clients, ironically, will have an opinion and they'll tell you. And I've realized that some clients live a better life because I send them an extra $1,000 a month. And then ironically, if they don't spend it, I have them send me the 12 grand back. I'll send them the $1,000 a month again, because that's how I'm going to get them to spend it. Then,
Mhm.
then them ever will letting themselves say, can you send me 12 grand? Like they don't want to call and, like they're taking money for me. I keep telling them it's not my money. This is
Yeah.
for you. Uh, but it
It's your
goes back
account.
to, right. But it goes back to the, it's not having to spend time worrying about timing a market. It's
Yeah.
spending time asking yourself this question: is the market in general at its all-time high? Yes or no? If it is, I have no idea if it's going to go higher. If it's not, I know it's not at its all-time high. If it's not at its all-time high, for most clients, I want to wait if I'm going to sell anything.
Yeah.
And so that's my timing strategy. Unlike some people that are trying to like guess the swing or try and get out to get back in, to
When
get
you
back
get back in
in.
at the right
Oh,
time. That
right.
sounds exhausting.
Correct. Correct. And so, and a lot of this goes back to whether you're buying or selling in a portfolio, most of the time should be driven based on whether or not the client has a need from the portfolio. And so we spend more of our time trying to time clients' needs to then try and understand, when the markets are up, what do we need to harvest the next 12 to 24 months in advance, rather than reacting to. And I think the worst experience clients get and the stress advisors have is because they're not trying to time clients' needs. They're putting themselves at the mercy of wherever the markets are at when the client calls with the need.
Yeah.
And now they
Well,
need that 12 grand, and you're selling it with the market down, or you're selling it at a time that, had you known 6 months earlier, maybe you'd have done it differently.
and you talk often about the risk of randomly raising cash needs for clients, that dollar cost ravaging, that you're going in and you're taking money out at the absolute worst times for your clients' longevity. That's a huge problem for clients trying to beat inflation.
Well, and so to clarify that one, right? Uh, Putting money in investments every month, in your 401ks or dollar cost averaging,
Mhm.
gives you statistically the lowest average purchasing price, which is what you want. Buy low, lowest average purchase price. Well, by definition, if you then monthly liquidate money to live off of, you are liquidating at the lowest average sell price, which is what you don't want if you're supposed to sell
Yeah.
high. And COVID was the greatest example of this, because the market corrected like 30% in March, and stayed down for several months before it recovered by the end of the year. And so if you were selling every month, by the time you got to March, you were selling shares 30% from where they were a month earlier and continuing to do so for the rest of the month. And in the strategy that we had was, because we raised cash in advance, we had what clients told us they needed, because that's the timing we focused on. We raised money going into that year in cash. We therefore used that money when the market sold off 30%, and we're able to not have to sell any of those shares through that downturn. And the only way you can do that is to have reserves set aside, and that gives you the time that you need to avoid those downturns, and it
Mhm.
gives the clients that are in retirement the peace of mind of knowing. It gives the clients in retirement the ability to understand, hey, this has been set aside so that if the markets sell off, you don't have to be worried or concerned that you're losing whatever it is you thought we were setting aside for you, because we pre-funded it, because we're trying to time your future and not the present.
Yeah. So to summarize, the dollar cost averaging that you're doing into your 401k and getting into the market is exactly what you want clients to be doing. But advisors who are dollar cost ravaging, basically taking on a monthly basis, is really causing the higher risk for clients' longevity.
The difference is the accumulation phase is easy. Put money in as often as you can. When you go to retire and live off of this, that's where focusing on what the clients are going to need from the portfolio, whether it's monthly or annually or quarterly or as the one-offs bubble up, um, and pre-funding those, trying to be able to understand what those are and then pay attention to where the markets are at, because in any calendar year, there are opportunities where the market's at the highest point of that calendar year. Sometimes it's the highest point ever. And then there's a lot of times it's not. And
Yeah.
by having those reserves set aside, you're basically having this pact with God that here, I'm going to set this aside and give myself time that in the future, I'll have another opportunity to raise again at a better price than if I took money out every month and therefore gave. And the thing that drives me nuts in this industry, and in fact, some of the robo advisors or some of this AI technology that's coming out and some of these products that are trying to remove the advisor will automate this. Well, here, you put money in this product and it'll put the diversification in place. And then you hit the press button, and every month on the 15th, it'll liquidate the $5,000 you need and it'll send you to your bank account every month. And yet no one tells them, yeah, but now you're going to get the lowest average exit price throughout the year because you're going to basically be at the mercy of the markets on a monthly basis. And the markets are volatile. They don't stay at their all-time highs. They tend to trade 10, 20% around that all-time high. And if you're selling in those downswings, you're losing a lot of purchasing power that you should have been trying to preserve or protect. And by having some of this cash reserve set aside for this next 12 to 24 months, we may be foregoing some upside return, but it is at the it's to avoid the risk of the loss that you have in selling in those downturns. And over time, we find it just a much smoother and much easier process for the clients to understand. And it's a much better place where we can focus on knowns than focusing on the unknown of trying to wait to time a market to take money out. Or worse, I think the greatest mistake, again, the clients make or advisors make is you get the phone call for the purchase that's substantial that the client knew for the last year or two they're going to make, and they're surprising you. They need the money today, and you're at the mercy of the market.
Yeah.
And you can
Well, and that
avoid that
goes,
by timing clients' needs.
yeah, it's like, and you will know that if you're asking those questions on a proactive basis, if you're actually sitting down, going through those questions, whether it's a brand new client or a client you've been meeting with for 10 years, is actually sitting down and taking the time to know what those needs are and actually building that relationship.
And the
So,
and the problem is the familiarity bias kicks in. And so one of the things I try and tell clients is in an annual review, let me reserve the right to pretend like I don't know you and ask you some
mhm,
of the same questions over again to see if the answers are the same. Because one of the
mhm,
mistakes that can be made in the advisor client relationship is the assumption that nothing's changed. And so therefore you don't ask the question, what's your current level of your bank balance and what threshold do you want that to be at so you don't have to worry about the market's returns? Or what is you usually buy cars every 5 years, but are you looking to buy a car this next year? Like, even though you bought one yet last year, right?
mhm.
It's continually asking some of the same questions over and over again because people's lives change, their needs change, their wants change. And every day, subconsciously, each one of these clients is living out their future in their head. And it's just finding out what are the new answers in there and what do we
Yeah.
need to do about that? And do we need to make that a reality in the next 12 months for you financially?
And I think that's honestly solid relationship advice. If you've been married or in a relationship for any length of time, your spouse, your partner is someone different. Like you can't pretend it's the same person you married.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations and do that and get to the meat of it and not avoid that.
Yep.
So the thing that we focus on is like the three different buckets for our clients. The bank account, clients keeping their 1 to 6 months of cash needs in there for day-to-day things. Talk a little bit about how clients in that retirement transition shift from seeing that deposit monthly from like their income, from their paycheck, that actually kind of switching that script and how we can, as advisors, can help clients kind of turn on that spigot as you talk about and realizing how their bank account is now funded.
Yeah, so I'm going to go in reverse. So let's go with the accumulator
That
for a
works.
second. So yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yes.
Go for
Well,
it.
that's
Why
what you
not?
want. Let me do the opposite. Perfect.
Hey, I'm
That's
here
how
to
we
tee
roll
up. We
here.
can talk either
Yes.
way.
Um, what people need first and foremost is what we call a cash management plan. So for an accumulator, it is okay, what is the amount on your, your monthly bills or your checking balance that you want to have? So you can pay your bills, you got a cushion in there. Usually it's 1 to 2 to 3 months worth of bills. So you can pay stuff and you got a cushion before you have to get worried about moving anything else. In the CFP, they talk about one income. You want 6 months of expenses, not income, 6 months of expenses. Those are two different things. If it's a dual income household, it's only 3 months of expenses because this is, again, the risk of losing a job or changing jobs. You just got a peace of mind in your checking account. And as an advisor, I don't want to get caught up in your day-to-day expenses. That most people that build wealth have that nailed down and live life, enjoy life, and now
You don't need to
beyond
manage
that,
that part for them.
yeah, and it's a threshold. And we just ask, what's the dollar amount you want in your checking account? 20 grand. Great. What are we going to do when we have 30? Right.
Mhm.
And what we try and do is create for them, in an ideal world, I want clients to have a checking account. And then with us, I want them to have the emergency fund. We call it a cash reserve account. This is the money that's going to basically be the cushion between the long-term investment portfolio and their short-term needs in the next 12 to 24 months, whatever that is. And talk to them about accumulators. Okay, 20 grand in the checking account. We want 50 grand in the cash reserve account. And the game is, Mr. and Mrs. Client, at the end of the month, when you pay your bills, pay yourself last after you've paid everything out. If there's $5,000 left in your checking account to take it back to 20 grand, send us that $5,000. Write that check last, and we're going to add it to this cash reserve account. Now, if the cash reserve account's got $50,000 in it, and those are the two thresholds, then that $5,000 can go to fund the Roth IRA or the IRA or the non-qualified investment account or whatever the strategy is that we created. But it's if this, then that, right? And it keeps clients from accumulating too much cash and showing up with us with the anxiety of now they're going to make $100,000 investment decision that would have been so much more easier for them to make 5 grand at a time. The anxiety is less. Plus, we're not at the mercy where the markets are at when they show up with a bigger dollar amount. It's that dollar
Yeah.
cost averaging, again, assuming they're doing their 401ks and those types of things ahead of time. And a lot of people just need to be given this advice to go do that, right? It's your cash
They just need
reserve,
to be
your
told what to
checking
do.
account. Yeah. And then it's just like, okay, if the cash reserve isn't where it's supposed to be, the checking account's where it's supposed to be, maybe we turn down the 401k contributions till those reserves are built back up. Because this is how you avoid going into that credit card debt or making purchases that are financed at rates you don't want them to have. It's a cash management strategy. Now retirement, which is where you wanted me to go first. So we'll go there
That's
second.
okay. Like I
Just
said, we can be
because.
flexible.
Yes, here we go. So the problem is now the income stops, right? Now they're not the
Mm,
one that's producing the income. Well, it just
yep.
becomes the reverse, right? So it's the portfolio is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And there's $50,000 in this cash reserve account. There's $20,000 in the checking. And if they need $3,000 every month for cash flow purposes, we will set aside at least $36,000 on top of this $50,000 cash reserve to send $3,000 a month on the 15th into that checking account. And then we'll
Yep.
monitor that checking account balance to see, are they spending it? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing with it? Because they said this was their budget or this is what their needs were. And it tells us then on the portfolio side, what do we need to be paying attention to and raising going forward? But you
Mhm.
can't do this when they have 3 or 4 different checking accounts at 4 or 5 different banks and they have 4 or 5 different CDs and this, that, and the other thing else, because it's a matter of trying to understand when do you have too much in cash and when do you have not enough in cash. And it's a
Mhm.
strategy to basically, again, this is what we're going to spend. This is what the cushion is for the next 12 to 24 months. And then this is what is long term. And by separating those kind of at the highest levels,
Good level.
you can put a plan in place to create the understanding of who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
And keep clients from having to make all or nothing decisions, keeping clients from having to make um, uh, uh, building ways for clients on the accumulation phase to basically build wealth by not building it in cash first and foregoing 6 to 12 to 2 or 3 or 4 years. It took them to
Mhm.
build up this larger check that all of a sudden they show up with, and they're just anxious to give it to us and
Oh, to
invest it.
turn that over
Need
has
it.
got to be
Yeah.
challenging for the average person.
Yep. And it's so much easier to just let them on a monthly basis identify, I don't need this, so I'm going to set it over here. And if this over here bucket is filled up, that's the next 2 years what you said you're going to need. And you kind of know psychologically what you're doing
Hmm.
as far as your needs go. And our planning, we're checking on this on, as every year we're meeting with the clients, where's the bank balance? Here's the cash reserve. Is it enough? Gives us permission to make that long-term investment because the reserves are full.
Yeah.
And then it just flows in reverse when you get into retirement.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important for clients to understand that that 12 to 24 months worth of expenses that we've set aside for them is not subject to the market volatility, because then it kind of pulls some of that worry and panic. I don't know if those are if I can use those words, but like that's not comfortable for someone to think like, okay, I'm not going to be able to fund that anniversary trip we've been planning for 20 years. And they need to kind of know that they can still live their life, because as we've talked about, the markets do go up and down, but the plans that clients have for their life, it's really important that they're still able to live those out and their plans are not subject to market volatility.
Well, and what the other part of this is that, okay, in the industry we're in, if you haven't started with what we just talked about in this cash management strategy, and these different buckets from a philosophy standpoint, if you start with the risk questionnaire and how they feel
Oh,
about return and risk, right? You're going to get an
yeah.
entirely different answer on that same questionnaire after you've
Yeah.
identified this is what's in checking and if this is what's in cash reserve. And so you've covered the next 12 to 24 months of needs. So then the rest of it you don't need for probably 3 years or beyond.
Mhm.
Now that risk profile is entirely different. And I think too many
Oh, yeah.
advisors are starting with a questionnaire before they put even a plan in place to find out that, hey, if they need this bucket with 20 grand in our example and this bucket with 50 grand in our example, the rest of this all of a sudden most likely will be able to be exposed to the type of investments that need to beat inflation. That when you're blending these buckets, that the anxiety and the peace of mind, that's not peace of mind, the anxiety, the need to make sure you have the bank balance, the cash reserve account, the emotional weight of a smaller dollar amount blended into a larger dollar amount prevents the larger dollar amount to be invested the way it should be after you identify the smaller ones and set those aside and now help them realize mentally, if emotionally, if this is sanctified, set apart in cash, in money markets, not fluctuating, never going to lose value because we've sanctified it.
Yeah.
Now, the rest of this, can we expose it to the growth it needs to keep up with inflation and fund the next 3 decades or 30 years of your retirement? Gives
Mhm.
you a different answer than if you don't tell them that, they will anchor a portfolio for 50 grand when the portfolio might be $1 million.
Yep. Yeah, and you have to, as the advisor, to kind of help the client differentiate those three different accounts for themselves, just so that they can be their emotions can be appropriately placed and not tied to the high water mark on their investments, or what they may or may not be able to spend in 3 months because they're worried about the upcoming election, or they're worried about maybe if they're paying enough attention to when the Fed's meeting again. Like, they need to not be anchored to those events.
Well, and the way you unanchor them, because I mean, we have these systems in place and we're still getting the question, what happens if
Mhm.
person gets elected? Or what happens if this
Uh-huh.
war turns this way? Or what happens if the Fed does this? And the answer is because we have these reserves funded, we don't have to worry about it, because what you're really saying is what happens if the markets sell off? What happens if these long-term investments decline in value because these events happen? And the whole purpose of an advisor to a client is put the client in a position to never have to sell when the market's down. Preferably they could buy, especially in the accumulation phase when the market's down. But for in those in retirement where you're no longer accumulating those shares, it is so much more important to pay attention to when you're selling those shares. And the reserves buy you time. And the reserves allow you not to have to react to the random unknowns that happen in any 12 to 24 month period of time, and therefore participate in what long-term fundamentals have to show, which is the population of the planet keeps growing. They keep consuming more. Companies provide products and services for those that are consuming this more, that create more profits for the companies that are providing the products and services to which you get to participate in the ownership in 12 to 24 month timeframes. Those valuations change dramatically based on the
Mm.
emotions of people. And by
Yep.
setting aside reserves, we don't have to participate in that volatility.
Yep. And I think helping remove clients from the emotion of the volatility makes a huge difference in the advisor's ability to focus on what they really need to be doing, because then they're not trying to manage clients' emotions as much as they would be if they were always constantly anchored in those reactionary phone calls. You have to ask the client those questions on the front end and then know what you need to put aside. You say, know the knowns. That gives you so
But
much more flexibility and freedom as an advisor.
But in a lot of times the clients, when they know, because we've timed their needs, that these resources have been set aside and they're calling us with anxiety, like the best therapy for a client that's calling us worried about something that they've in the that they've this piece of information they've taken in is like, go take 5 minutes and look out the window. I don't care if it's pouring rain, just the realization that, wait, the world is not ending, it's not changing, and it calmed down, because the headlines and this information age that we're getting in instant bits, that somehow like the world's going to end, and like there is no plan for Armageddon, right? And more often than not, for all the reasons the world was supposed to be ended and humanity was supposed to wipe itself off the planet, we have yet to do so, because whatever the problem was that got produced that created this uncertainty, there was somebody else that came up with a solution. Most likely, probably
Solution.
made, yeah, most likely made a bunch of money creating an investment or a product or a service to meet that solution. That, again, participating in investments, you get to participate in that. So the very thing you're worried about is the investments we have to basically solve the things that you're worrying about. And to get that long-term return, you have to fund these short-term reserves and forego, more often than not, if we're doing our job right, the clients want to take the reserve and invest it in that long-term investment. And that's where an advisor's got to step in and prevent the client from hurting themselves, because you have to have these foundational pieces of actually smaller dollars sanctified so the larger dollars can fluctuate. And more often than not, they fluctuate to the upside, but you can't put everything in. I think too many advisors build too much of the portfolio and not enough of the reserves, and then they don't time the client's needs. They're too busy getting excited about watching the markets bounce around.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like a really important piece to leave advisors with is that they're there to help give the clients perspective. They're there to help pull out those knowns, help their clients plan so that they can help prioritize those known needs. So then the advisor can do what they need to do with the rest of their portfolio. Is there anything else you want to leave advisors with today, Tyson?
Oh, now you want me to talk?
You can finish. I'm
I
sure
get
you
to finish?
dominated
I
most of
get
the
to wrap it up?
episode, but I'll let you wrap us up because I'm nice.
I think what one advisor said to me is like, oh my God, it could be that simple. Because
Mm,
the lie is you got to be able to try and go crack the code or be able to figure out the future that's just an unknown.
mhm.
And the reality is that the solution that the advisor is looking for is the answer to the question of what the client needs in the short term. That's what the client's going to get mad at you about when they need the money and the market's down and now you're having to sell, where you've now not added any value, most likely over the cost of whatever your product or solution the client's money was in. And by just asking forward looking questions and not spend so much time on the backwards looking performance, you can get the answers and the guidance you need from the client to make sure their assets are properly positioned to fund the life they want.
Well, and make sure everyone you take some perspective and go look outside and remind yourself that the world is not ending. Thank you for tuning into episode 8 of the Total Relationship Podcast. If you haven't already, follow or subscribe to know when new episodes are available. We are launching episodes every other Tuesday. And then make sure to also follow Total Relationship Advisors on LinkedIn to join other like minded advisors. Until next time.